When did you start with us?
I think I started working with you in the beginning of 2023, I believe. I think I initially
Mhm.
contacted you in 2022 and started everything in 2023.
And what was your goal when you started?
I think initially I was mainly looking for just asset protection structures just to protect the single family home real estate that we had. We had a few properties at that point, just looking for something beyond just the basic insurance on those properties, but something more to protect the equity that was growing in those properties as well.
Were we able to help you achieve your original goal?
Yeah, very much able to do that. Yeah, I feel very comfortable with the structure that we're able to work out and what we put together for that.
So, how long have you been investing?
In real estate since 2010 is when we bought our first rental property.
What did your investments look like before starting with us?
We had three single family rentals that we were managing through property managers. We planned to add a fourth very shortly after. I think we had our first conversations, and we had a handful of other real estate syndication investments that we've been making over the past several years as well.
Were you using any tax saving strategies at the time?
Nothing I would consider to likely be significant or more unusual than just standard Schedule E deductions with our taxes, but we weren't working with anybody externally or trying any kind of accelerated depreciation or anything like that tax-wise, just doing kind of the standard Schedule E depreciation schedules and normal deductions with that.
And how were you holding assets before working with us?
Before, everything was just held in my name personally, or my wife and I's name together as a couple, but there was no other asset protection kind of structure we had implemented prior to working with you.
What problems were you trying to solve?
I guess I would say I would feel like for several years we were potentially available of the potential need or the reason why your industry exists for providing asset protection kind of structures for investors. I've been aware for several years what that was all about and that there was potentially a need there to protect equity that's accumulated in rental real estate property in particular. So we were a little bit concerned about, as our equity was growing in several of these rental properties we were beginning to own, about a protection against maybe say frivolous lawsuits or something like that could potentially endanger the equity that we'd built up in these properties. So I viewed it, I don't think this was a term that Royal Legal ever used. I've listened to a few other podcasts from some other companies that provide products similar to yours. I think one of them termed something like it was insurance for your wealth. So I viewed it product as providing almost a solution for that we'd accumulated what we felt like was significant to us amount of wealth in that real estate by that point and wanted a form of insurance against potential threats to those that could come from lawsuits or things of that nature, and just more peace of mind with what again was to us a significant percentage of our wealth was in these handful of rental properties that we'd accumulated, and just looking for something beyond insurance and just the standard business practices that we're using to try to make sure that was protected for a long term going forward.
How did we help you solve those problems?
By addressing both of those main concerns I had, the peace of mind, and then also, again, feeling like we have an extra layer of security on those assets that we have, that they're both potentially harder for somebody to target. And then if somebody were to potentially consider us, somebody to potentially go after for a lawsuit, that there's maybe an added layer of protection there, or added layer of difficulty with trying to go after those assets than what we might be facing without that same structure in place. So I would say I feel like we are actually better protected potentially from something like that. But I think also importantly, just the peace of mind we have that it's not something I worry about throughout the year as I used to for a period of several years. While we were aware of some of the concerns before we actually took action on it, there was some concern there. I had less peace of mind about those assets being protected.
Where did you initially hear about us?
Maybe back as early as, like I said, maybe 2017 or 2018, that I first started learning about even your company specifically. I believe it was likely through Scott Smith's personal postings on the biggerpockets.com website. He was very active on that site. I'm not sure how much he still is. I'm not active on that site as much myself anymore, but at least in the late 20-teens, early 2020s, I believe he was pretty active on that site, talking to other people who were asking some of these same types of questions. I feel like a lot of the posts that he was making, I ended up looking into him and the company that he represented, watching a lot of his YouTube videos that he'd made, just learning more about what the company was like, what the structure was like, the types of products he was recommending. So I think that's what really got me focusing on your company in particular, was largely his activity and feeling like I understood him and gained a certain sense of trust in him and the company that he was running based on his activity on Bigger Pockets, as well as some of the podcast interviews and other YouTube videos that he'd done as well. But I was also looking into a few other companies that offer similar types of products to yours at the time. But Scott stood out, I guess, just in terms of kind of his personality, the way he approached answering questions seemed more appealing than maybe some of the other competitors out there did.
What was your experience with our products and the team?
Overall, happy so far with everybody I've worked with. Certainly no concerns. It's feel like it's been a pretty seamless, straightforward process from start to finish, which was good. That was part of what I was looking for as well when I was looking at Royal Legal, was a streamlined customer experience, which I feel like I got. I know this can be a fairly complex, process. Certainly when it was new to me as a concept, the complexity was one of the more intimidating factors that made me reluctant to begin the process. So I was looking for a company that looked like they basically hold your hand through the process and walked you through, made sure that I had everything submitted I needed to make the process go well. And it did. It worked out as I was hoping it would with that.
In what areas did you get the most value? Why do you think that is?
I think, again, your website offered some good information. I feel like, again, just some of the resources, more the educational materials that might have been pointed to. I'm not sure how much of that was, again, directly through your site or just that I found somewhat on my own searching through YouTube and other articles that Scott had written over the last several years. But I think for me, one of the largest things that was beneficial early in the process was just the educational materials about how the structures work, how they fit in with one another, what some of the different legal terms meant, and some of the reasons why you prefer the certain types of Series LLC structures that you do, for example. So just gaining more understanding about how those different entities work, how they're structured, how they fit together. The educational material is very important. I consumed a lot of that over a period of a couple of years. I'm just trying to better understand how the structure would work. I wanted to be very comfortable with how all of it was laid out before I ever chose to move any assets into this.
How likely are you to refer us?
Very likely. I'm certainly nothing negative about the company. I feel like the product is obviously a somewhat more kind of niche product to real estate investors, is at least the way that aspect of your company that I've seen. So I would say somebody in a similar situation to myself, I would recommend the product. I would say that, again, two hesitations I had getting involved with it in general was, one, the complexity and gaining enough comfort in the complexity that I was willing to go forward with that. I feel like it is still a complex product, but Royal Legal definitely helps make that, lessens that concern, certainly makes it more intelligible and easier to understand what we're working with and how everything fits together. And the second concern was really the cost going into it as well. That was certainly what I felt was a roadblock early on. Feeling like the cost was justified relative to the product that I was getting. It definitely seemed steep to me early on in my investing career when I maybe first started looking into this around 2017, 2018. Relative to the assets we had, it didn't seem like it offered a significant value based on what the cost was going in. But again, as those assets grew to a more substantial amount, the cost definitely seemed much more worthwhile and much more reasonable at that point. So I guess it would depend on the investor. There's probably, you might attest some value into starting this early as an investor, as opposed to waiting until later and then having to add and adjust a lot of things later. So there's certainly benefits to starting it earlier, but I think the cost could be a hindrance to a lot of people to start that earlier than otherwise maybe. But I would certainly, I think, recommend the product overall.